Indeed, the topic today is Life and Times of Cy Ten Bruggencate. I did not choose that topic.
Amen.
I've already checked the audience, and my stalkers are not present, so I can safely say that as far as the life and times of Cy Ten Bruggencate goes, nobody cares. But since Bob wanted to know, I'm going to give him a little bit of background, so we can look at this as just like a private conversation between Bob and myself, and you could act as though you're listening in. So I suppose the only interesting thing about me is that I am you out there. I don't have the degree behind my name. I'm not the pastor. People were stopping me. They're saying, "Where are you, pastor?" I'm not a pastor. I'm a boiler operator. We're going to get into that a little bit more later on. But I came out with a film last year. It's called How to Answer the Fool. And so how I came from being a boiler operator to teaching you apologetics, maybe that's what we're going to get into a little bit this morning. And this film, by the way, it's available on the table back there for a donation of any amount, from 1 cent to $1 million. If you had planned on giving more than $1 million, feel free to take 2. These are the topics that I had the option of giving. Reformed systematic theology and necessary foundation for apologetics and evangelism. I got rid of that one because I don't know what that means. See, I was in a room with a bunch of pastors last night, and they were saying, you know, they're this and that, all these different initials, and they were talking way over my head. I thought, what am I doing here? So hopefully by the end of this talk, you won't be saying the same thing. The other topic was how Cornelius Van Til influenced my life in biblical evangelism in the church. You know, that would give my haters too much ammo, so I decided not to talk on that, because there are people who say that I've dumbed down Cornelius Van Til too much, and I don't apologize for that. And hopefully we'll talk more about the methodology that I teach as far as apologetics goes tomorrow, but you asked for it, so you're going to get something about my own background. Indeed, I am you out there. Probably, you know, there's a lot out there who have more of an education than myself, but I'm the average person. And I was working in a boiler room 6 years ago, and I came to, like I said, have this film and be able to teach apologetics. So that's why I want to be able to give you some assurance with the fact that anybody can do this. We've been commanded to give a reasoned defense of our faith, and I am living proof that anyone can do it. I was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Actually, when I was born there, it was called North York, and the mayor wasn't on crack. If you've heard of Rockford, the whole scenario. Since then, however, Toronto has snorted up many of the surrounding communities, and now North York is known as Toronto, and that's what it says on my passport anyways. I'm the 5th eldest of 7 children. I have 4 brothers and 2 sisters. My sister, however, she has 5 brothers, but she only has 1 sister. I normally say that, people say, "Oh, you're from a broken home." It's terrible. Do the math. Ours was a Christian home where Jesus' love was lived and shown, as the poem goes. And I don't know a time when I didn't profess Jesus Christ as Lord. And I know there's people who come up to you and say that if you don't know when you became a Christian, then you're not a Christian. And to them I simply ask, when did you start loving your mother? And if they can't say when they started loving their mother, I said, I guess you don't love your mother then. Doug Wilson gives an example of somebody who's safe from drowning in their teenage years. It'll make it on the 6 o'clock news. You know, big story, someone saved from drowning. But how arrogant would it be for that person to say to somebody who was brought to swim lessons their entire life that they can't swim? Now, I don't say that I was always a Christian, I just don't know when God saved me. My father, he was born and raised in Indonesia to Dutch parents, and there they owned a Ford assembly plant. My family used to have money. But although the name Ten Bruggencate is hard to pronounce here, in Holland it's quite simple. 10 is a prefix. Some people call me Cy 10, but 10 is actually a prefix for my last name, like Van or De. People ask me what 10 means, I say it's actually my rating. But my brother, he said, is that out of 100? So I don't say that anymore. But I don't know how Cy 10 got around. A lot of people call me Cy 10 instead of just Cy, because 10 is part of my last name. But I think it's the atheists who really jumped on that, because Cy 10, they say, sounds like Satan. So, and they seem to like that. And I think, well, maybe if you're Australian, slighting. But my youngest brother lives in Australia, actually, and I was visiting him once, and he told me about this American newspaper columnist, and he wrote Australian, S-T-R-I-N-E, strine. So somebody asked him, where are you from? And they say, I'm strine. I guess that's how this fellow figured that they say Australian. But anyhow, and this is another thing that I'm going to let in on the throngs here, is that my first name is actually not Cy. My first name is Roland. It's a Dutch name, it's R-O-E-L-A-N-D, but my parents decided to call me by my middle name, which was Cy. And it's S-Y-E, but in Holland it's actually S-I-J-E. But they have a Y with 2 dots on it, and they don't have that letter here, so it turned out to be Cy. So actually, my name is Roland Cy van Bruggencate. I know it's a mouthful, but I remember my father going back to Holland for a business trip once, and he told the story of he was registering at a hotel, and the woman, taking his name, said, "What's your name?" He said, "Up to Bruggencate." And the guy behind him, his colleague from Canada, said, "What's your name?" "Joe Burns." And the woman said, "Could you spell that, please?" You don't get that here. Like I said, my family used to have money. They had a Ford assembly plant, my father did, in Indonesia. It was a Dutch colony. His parents were Dutch. But the Japanese invaded Indonesia. And my father's family destroyed their own plant so that the Japanese could use it for the war effort. And my grandfather died at the age of 39, just at the beginning of the occupation, with all the stress that was involved and under mysterious circumstances. But my father was just old enough at that time to go to when the Japanese occupation started, to go to the male concentration camp. He was just a teenager at the time, but the rest of the family went to the family camp, but he was just old enough to go to the male concentration camp, and his mother died in the camp and he never saw her again. So he was there for about 3 years. And there's actually a book that came out recently in my area, of people in my area that were interned in concentration camps during the war, and there's a chapter on my father there. When my father was liberated, he moved to the Netherlands, and there he met my mother, and they didn't get married there, but they moved to Canada. My mother's family moved to Canada, and my father followed, and they were married. My father passed away in January of 2011, and I'll probably get into that a little bit Wednesday when I talk about Reformed theology, but it's the beauty of losing a loved one when you're Reformed. I remember looking at the lady in the funeral home there saying, I'm glad he's gone. He suffered. I love him and I miss him. But really, I'm glad he's gone because I know he's with our Heavenly Father. And the woman looked at me, she said, well, my mother, she had 8 brain tumors and she died in agony. I was glad to see her go too. And I said, if my father had 20 brain tumors, I'd want to see him live for an eternity in that agony rather than go to hell. She looked at me like I had 2 heads. But it was a comfort. And I remember she telling me, you picked out a really nice area in the graveyard. I said, I don't care. She said, which casket would you like? I said, the cheapest one you got. And they pulled it out of the basement, and it was ugly. I'm telling you, it was white with this blue argyle. Looked like there were cigarette holes burning, and I just loved it. I loved it. I thought, man. But anyhow, I actually went to school for law and security. I won't go through my kindergarten years. I don't want to bore you any more than I'm doing already. But I went to school for law and security. I was going to become a police officer. It might have helped when I was stopped this morning. I got off with a warning. Man, they're strict out here. I just turned the corner and he nailed me, and it was 39 and a 40. And there was no signs. But anyhow, he let me off. I wasn't from any area. So instead I followed in the footsteps of my Uncle George, and I became a stationary engineer. I believe here they call them power engineers. And I'm basically a boiler operator. The first 10 years of my career, I worked in a hospital. The first 2.5 years of that, I worked for the hospital's energy from waste plant. And that's a place where they burned the city garbage to produce steam to make electricity to heat and cool the hospital. So 2.5 years I worked with the city garbage. Does anybody want to guess what constitutes, what makes up most of city garbage? Because I got to learn that. Diapers. Yeah. And you'd think after 2.5 years you'd get used to the smell. But I remember on my last day there, I almost threw up. It was disgusting. But then 7.5 years I moved into the I moved into the hospital itself. Now, a boiler operator, I think in a way that's kind of helped me with what I'm doing now, because the first place I worked anyways, it was a really hairy situation. Things were always going wrong there. Like if a boiler, I don't know if you know the boilers, it's probably in the bowels of this building here. If a boiler were to explode, it would level a city block. So it was our job to make sure that didn't happen. But I've talked to people who have worked a 40-year career and have never lifted the emergency safeties on the boiler. There's the safeties that lift when you overpressurize it. But that energy from waste plant, I remember one day we did it 3 times before break for 3 different reasons. So I think that kind of prepared me for some of the heated situations that I get in with unbelievers, or professed unbelievers, I should say. I remember one time I transferred into the hospital after that, and we were responsible for the diesel generators, and one night, it was a children's hospital, and the power quit, and the diesel generator quit. So this children's hospital, the largest in the city, had absolutely 0 power. And I pictured myself testifying at the coroner's inquest from all the premature babies that would have died in an incubator. But by the grace of God, no one died. That didn't happen. And from there, I moved to an automotive assembly plant. And I also worked in the boiler room there. And it was nice because when things happened there, you weren't dealing with babies anymore, you were dealing with cars. And when something happened with the line there, we just didn't care. I mean, we still wanted to get the job done, but people who did not